West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So Glenn, we've got some more news from Trump-aligned Judge Aileen Cannon. It seems like she is again moving to benefit Donald Trump. Can you talk about her unorthodox decision in court?
Judge Aileen Cannon has just sort of virtually torn up the case schedule again, delayed matters yet again to the extreme advantage of Donald Trump, because the last thing he wants is to go to trial down in Florida before the November election. And this time, Brian, what she did is really reinforcing of the fact that she has no business presiding over Donald Trump's case. What she has done is say, you know what, I want to have some more hearings in this case. And specifically, what I want to take up at an evidentiary hearing is Donald Trump's claim that the special counsel has no lawful authority to be appointed or to investigate or prosecute me. Here's the thing about that, Brian. The special counsel and its precursor, the independent counsel statute, has been affirmed by the court, including the Supreme Court, over and over and over, dating back to 1988. And as recently as in litigation surrounding January 6th. And remember Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's criminal campaign chairman? He directly attacked the special counsel statute under which Bob Mueller operated. And the courts said basically, Paul, be quiet and go away. This has been, okay, that's my spin. They didn't exactly put it that way. But this has been resolved by courts over and over again. Stop with the frivolous motions. In substance, this is a settled question of law. However, Judge Cannon not only wants to set lengthy arguments on it, but it gets worse, Brian, because she has granted the request of outside parties who are not part of this litigation, not only to file what are called amici or amicus briefs, which is a friend of the court brief if some outside party has some burning interest in saying, wait, there's this one unique aspect of the law here, and we would like to offer, Your Honor, a brief on it to the extent it might be helpful to you in resolving this question. But she's actually said, guess what? Those outside folks, come on in and present oral arguments to the trial court. That is a special kind of judicial insanity. Brian, I spent 30 years in courtrooms, both military and civilian, both trial court and appellate courts, and both local courts and federal courts. Not once in 30 years did I ever see a non-party invited in by a judge to give oral arguments in a hearing that they are not a party to. That's judicial insanity. I've been surveying some of my friends who are also, long-time experienced prosecutors. They've never heard of it. I'm not saying it has never been done in the history of our criminal justice system. I've never encountered it, and it's just yet another data point that proves that Judge Aileen Cannon's impartiality to preside over this case might reasonably be questioned, and that's the language of the federal statute, 28 United States Code, Section 455. If a judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, she must, by law, remove herself, recuse from the case. Of course, she has violated that federal law over and over and over again, and I would suggest she has just violated it once more.
So there's two issues at play here. One is that she continues to push back the schedule in Jack Smith's request to impose a partial gag order, and the second is that she's inviting all of these, who I'm certain are going to be pro-Trump voices to present arguments, even though they're not parties to this case, arguments in court to try to sway the jury one way or the other. I can imagine which way that's going to be, but I want to talk about the gag order for a moment. Isn't it the whole point of a gag order that they have to be dealt with some urgency, given that the whole point of one is that they are inherently preventing the defendant from saying stuff that he or she shouldn't be saying?
Yeah, I've been so consumed with her, let's say, unorthodox decision to just let a bunch of what some of the news agencies are reporting as right-wing lawyers come in and make these arguments in favor of Donald Trump, even though they're not parties to the case. I've been so consumed with that. You're right. The other piece of it is she's basically at a leisurely pace taking up Jack Smith's request for a gag order. And he basically filed it under sort of an emergency circumstance. Why? Because Donald Trump was endangering FBI agents by lying and saying that they were preparing to assassinate him and hurt his family on the day they executed the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. And the truth is, and we saw this in court filings from Jack Smith, the truth is that the FBI and the Department of Justice coordinated before the execution of the search warrant with Donald Trump's lawyers to make sure they would be there on the grounds at Mar-a-Lago to execute that search warrant on a date that neither Donald Trump nor any of his family members would even be in the state of Florida. And then Donald Trump said they came there to try to assassinate me and hurt my family members. What does that do? It puts a target on the back of every FBI agent that, is just trying to enforce the laws of our nation. So Jack Smith said, we need an emergency gag order in place. And, Judge Cannon just sort of gave it the back of her hand, and she'll set it for some robust argument in the future.
Well, not only that, she actually tried to sanction Jack Smith for having the audacity to put forward this motion when, a judge of all people should be able to see through this bullshit way easier than the usual Fox News host. I mean, she knows that A, Donald Trump wasn't even in the state, B, that this is just standard traditional language that force is able to be used in the execution of a search warrant, just like it was used in Joe Biden's search warrant, just like it was used in every search warrant that moves forward. But she just fell for or continues to perpetuate this right-wing narrative that's being propped up by the gateway pundits of the world, these right-wing provocateurs of the world.
And she threatened to sanction Jack Smith for the following reason, according to Judge Cannon's ruling. Before you file a motion, you are required to confer with opposing counsel. I've done it hundreds of times. What does it look like? You call up opposing counsel or send an email and say, hey, I'm going to ask that the court put a gag order in place. Will your client agree to the gag order such that maybe we can bypass the court? And not surprisingly, Donald Trump's attorney said, no, he won't agree to a gag order. He's not going to stop running his mouth. And we opposed the motion. So what did Jack Smith do? He put in a footnote in the motion itself, we've conferred with counsel. They said they opposed the motion. Oh, and by the way, they don't even want to confer with us or talk with us anymore about it until like a week or so down the road, because we have the Memorial Day holiday weekend coming up, and why would anybody want to protect FBI agents in a timely manner? At which point Jack Smith said, conferral over, here's the information. She actually said, Jack Smith, if you do that again, this sort of summary conferral without the defense having adequate time to mull it over and ruminate over it a week or more, I may sanction you. Again, this is judicial if not misconduct, pretty gross abuse of what a judge should be doing, how a judge should be handling these issues.
Let's finish off with this. To that exact point, it does seem at this point that Jack Smith has all but given up on seeking her removal. I mean, he's had more than enough opportunities from the 11th Circuit rebuking Judge Cannon before this case even really took off. Her perversion of the Presidential Records Act, where she would have given basically the jury instructions that comported with Donald Trump's bogus interpretations of that act. We have her pushing the case back, in the trial date back indefinitely, even past a date that was proposed by the defense. And now we have stuff like this, where she's allowing, randos basically to just come in and offer arguments to the court. And then, of course, her inability to impose a necessary gag order, even if it puts members of law enforcement's lives in jeopardy. Doesn't seem like he's going to budge on this issue. Would you agree with that? Do you think that this ship has effectively sailed as far as Smith is concerned?
Yeah, sadly, I would agree with that. And that excellent overview, that summary you just gave of some of Judge Cannon's lack of impartiality, really should all be put in a motion to recuse, and it should be litigated in the full light of day so we can get the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to definitively rule on the issue, so at least we can have some confidence in the outcome of the case at the end of the day. If the 11th Circuit decides that no, the law says that she can still preside over this case because her impartiality can't reasonably be questioned, then at least I would have more confidence in the outcome of the case. But it was an excellent summary, and frankly, I would love to see all of that put into a motion to recuse Judge Cannon and have that filed and litigated.
It is Thursday, the 6th of June of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Mertro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life. Oh, yes, spicy. Well, it is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and quite a date. We're not going to have very many more of these, treks across the ocean of these old guys going to the National Cemetery there in Normandy and being feted for the heroes that they are. So, because they're old. I think this is the last one. Certainly not another decade. But I gotta say that the cultural memory generally in Europe is much longer than anything we in America. We can't even conceive it. We just don't have a historical memory like Europe has. It's hard to explain unless you've been there. Anyway, when you see these reports and pictures of, thousands of kids singing to, the infantrymen or, the soldiers from D-Day as they're sitting in their wheelchairs, those kids actually have a heartfelt connection. They have been taught what happened to their country. The collaborators, the Vichy traitors. I will also say that France has been loath to put up statues and memorials to the traitors who were part of the Vichy government. I'm just saying. Okay, they don't do that there. Maybe they will if they get enough of the right-wing neo-Nazis that those guys on D-Day fought against. I keep telling everybody, rust never sleeps. The rust of the Confederacy, the rust of the Nazis, you got to work really hard all year round to rub that shit out. Stop for a day, and it's more work in the long run. God, stop for a week, a year, a decade. Next thing you know, yeah, contraception. You don't get contraception, little lady. But you can get Blue Chew. How about banning Blue Chew instead of contraception? I'm all for that. Okay. You can get your dick pills, but ladies, you're gonna be washing the laundry and washing the dishes, taking care of the kids, or else. I think that's really the or else is what they really like to put onto it. Okay. They got rid of contraception. I keep telling everybody it's going to be no-fault divorce, and then it's going to be just divorce. Unless the husband wants to get out of the deal. Then divorce will be okay. Okay. Well, I guess the repealing of the 19th Amendment, that's not far behind, is it? They're taking rights away. I just love this. And we're sitting here taking it. All right. Hey, Perry and Ronnie Jackson got put on the House Intel Committee. Mm-hmm. Why they are not in jail is still a wonder to me, but I guess it's part of the speech and debate clause. You can't put Nazis in jail when they're speeching and debating. Okay. We weren't in collusion with Vlad. We were just in speech and debate. Alrighty. We do have a word for their involvement in trying to overthrow the United States of America during a violent insurrection. And we know what that is. Okay, well, that's because MAGA Mike, I guess when he was talking to God, which I'm pretty sure is Harlan Crow, Leonard Leo, and I don't know, whoever Leonard Leo's boss is. Who is Leonard Leo's boss? Because he's a bag man. Let's be clear about this. Oh, yeah, I know he has his ideas about, the trajectory of what religion and government is supposed to be. But he's a bagman, okay? His beliefs align with those who are giving him the bucks. Yep. There ought to be a maximum amount that a person can have to run for government. That's what I'm thinking. Otherwise, you're going to get Lex Luthors, and they're going to, do what they do, like they're doing right now. We have somehow allowed the Lex Luthors in the world to, take us over. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, who's the penguin? We'll find out soon enough, as if we don't already know. Alrighty, well, what do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe as we begin this fabulous Mertro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? I should mention also on the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, I do have the recipe for my Mertro Shrimp and Grits, which we serve on Thursdays now, but you can have it anytime. Usually, I confess, a lot of times I'll do the Mertro Shrimp and Grits on maybe a Sunday, because it's a little involved. But anyway, not so daunting that you should not try it, okay? So check it out. It's there, and it's rather tasty, if I say so myself. All right. So at the top, of course, Eileen Cannon issued a new tactic to delay Trump's espionage trial. They keep calling it a documents trial. It's an espionage trial, okay? Guy stole nuke secrets and sold them. On the rest of the menu, a state ethics panel ruled an Oregon lawmaker who suggested non-Christians are ill-suited for elected office did not violate House rules. Okay. Because it was on a private podcast. Except he does have a history of saying things on the floor of the State House that are rather, shall we say, unbecoming. Local officials on the Hawaiian island of Maui voted to oppose a U.S. military proposal to build new telescopes on the summit of Haleakala volcano. And I know I pronounced that incorrectly, but hey, you know which one we're talking about. Oh, get this. A hailstone the size of a pineapple that was found in Texas will likely set a state record. Ooh. Yeah, the GOP down there, the MAGAs down there, can hang their hat on that. We got the largest hailstones falling down here because of the climate change. Don't say climate change. After the break, we moved to the chef's table where the Emirati leader met with a Taliban official facing a $10 million U.S. bounty over attacks on U.S. citizens. You know, if the Emirati leader played his cards right, he could get that bounty. Just saying. And the Netherlands is the first to kick off 4 days of European Union elections across 27 nations. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending, along with Ricky, Netroots Nation in Baltimore this year. So we'll keep you apprised of how that will be going, and we look forward to their dispatches from Baltimore. So thank you, Ricky, and thank you, Kelly, for everything that you guys do. Thank you. If you would like to then, you out there in radio listening land, if you would, please take a gander to the left from that chat room link that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. And you'll then notice the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay the bills and all the other sundry costs of running this powerhouse of resistance. And we thank you for your generosity. So if you could afford to send us what you might spend on, I don't know, a slice of pie, an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could, how about that, a slice of pie and an espresso-type coffee drink. If you could buy that dish for us once a month, even just the espresso-type coffee drink, come on. If you can send those funds to us once a month, it really does help us pay those bills and those sundry costs associated with running this powerhouse of resistance. So thank you for your generosity. The dogs are barking outside. Who knows? Maybe other dogs are being walked on a leash. Anyway, if you would also like to follow Netroots Radio on the social medias, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a lot more too. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on the social medias at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diaries on Daily Codes, as I mentioned earlier, 10 minutes before showtime. And if you follow my social media feeds, you'll have the link to the Daily Codes diaries, and you can follow the actual reporters and their reportage and other little tidbits of information like, a recipe for shrimp and grits. You can do that following my social media feeds. Oh my gosh. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, Audible, really wherever podcasts can be found. All righty. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of The Oregonian by Julia Shumway, who works at the Oregon Capitol Chronicle. A Southern Oregon lawmaker's comments on a podcast suggesting non-Christians aren't qualified to hold elected office did not violate legislative rules around a safe and respectful workplace, a House panel determined on Monday. The House Committee on Conduct voted 3-1 that Representative E. Werner Reschke, a Republican from Malin, did not violate House rules when he told a conservative Christian podcast host that people want Christians, not atheists, Muslims, or materialists. That's rich. I mean that is no pun intended either. That's rich coming from a prosperity gospel kind of guy. Just saying, okay? He doesn't want those people in government. Well, I don't want materialists like him in government either. Okay? But anyway, Representative Jason Kropf, a Democrat from Bend, joined Republican Representatives Kevin Mannix of Salem and Ed Deal of Staten in voting to clear Reschke, while Representative Tutron of Portland, a Democrat, voted against. Reschke did not respond to a request for comment. When has anybody ever responded? The investigation into Reschke stemmed from comments he made on a conservative Christian talk show in January that were reported by Oregon Public Broadcasting. During a conversation with former Arkansas lawmaker Jason Rapert, yeah, that's it, Rapert, Reschke said he was inspired to run for office because of men including George Washington, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln, and Ronald Reagan. Wait a second. You cannot put that racist Reagan in the same category as the founders. And anyway, George Washington, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln, separation of church and state, pal. You're misquoting them when you are going to be quoted later on in this article. I'm just giving them fair warning. Anyway, Reschke went on. You look at men and the struggles that they faced and the faith that they had. And those are the type of people that you want in government making tough decisions during tough times, he said. You don't want a materialist, and you don't want an atheist, and you don't want a Muslim, and you don't want, well, you want somebody who understands what truth is and understands the nature of man, the nature of government, and the nature of God. Okay. Now, they didn't say that he violated anything about a safe workplace. But I got to say, a violation of separation of church and state seems to be a little bit more important in this situation. But that's just me because I'm a romantic. Democratic leaders condemned his comments and anti-LGBTQ plus sentiments that newly appointed State Representative Dwayne Juncker, a Republican from Grants Pass, had expressed on his campaign website on the final day of the legislative session. Members of civil rights groups and State Representative Tom Anderson, a Democratic member from Salem, gathered outside the Capitol to protest Reschke's and Juncker's comments. Meanwhile, an attorney with Jackson Lewis, a Portland law firm, was quietly investigating whether Reschke's comments violated legislative rules meant to ensure the Capitol is a safe and respectful workplace. Two people who attorney Sarah Ryan described as mandatory reporters said they had been approached by others with concerns about Reschke's comments. Mandatory reporters meaning that you go to them and then they report up the chain of violations of code or whatnot of other members. So that at least one person who didn't want to be identified felt that Reschke's comments adversely impacted their work at the Capitol. Legislative rules require state representatives, senators, and nonpartisan supervisors to report any behavior that could violate the Capitol's workplace policies. Legislative Equity Officer Boer Yang hired Ryan to investigate the reports, as well as a separate complaint about a July 2022 invitation from Reschke to a prayer vigil that was interpreted as threatening to LGBTQ plus individuals. Ryan quickly dismissed that complaint, saying there was no indication it affected anyone at the Capitol. Audrey McAvoy of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Mertro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Local officials on the Hawaiian island of Maui yesterday, Wednesday, voted to oppose a U.S. military proposal, Space Force, to build new telescopes on the summit of Halakala volcano, the last observatory project, to meet objection in the islands. The U.S. Space Force and Air Force want to build a new facility on the top of the volcano, Maui's highest peak, to track objects in space. The Maui County Council voted 9-0 to pass a resolution opposing the project. The measure said Halakala's summit was a sacred place used for religious ceremony, prayer, and connecting to ancestors. The resolution also said that the U.S. Space Force has not finished cleaning up a 700-gallon diesel fuel spill at the site of one of its existing telescopes. The spill occurred last year when a pump that supplies fuel to a backup generator failed to shut off during a lightning storm. The proposed new facility is called Amos STAR, which is an acronym for Air Force Maui Optical and Supercomputing Site Small Telescope Advanced Research. Good thing they're calling it Amos STAR instead. It would feature 6 telescopes enclosed in ground-mounted domes and one rooftop-mounted dome telescope. The county's resolution urged the military to heed community calls to cease their development efforts. It urged the National Park Service, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources to deny the project permits. The clear skies and dry air at the peak make for some of the world's best conditions for viewing space, similar to the summit of Mauna Kea on the Big Island, which hosts about a dozen telescopes. The summit rises to 10,023 feet. It already hosts multiple University of Hawaii observatories and an existing collection of Space Force telescopes called the Maui Space Surveillance Complex. Protesters tried to block the construction of a new observatory on Halakala in 2017, but building went ahead, and the Daniel K. Inouye Solar Telescope released its first images in 2020. Staff brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Storm trackers in the Texas Panhandle recovered a massive hailstone that researchers say is likely to be a new state record. Val and Amy Castor, veteran storm chasers with Oklahoma City television station KWTV, discovered a piece of hail more than 7 inches long on Sunday along the side of the road near Vigo Park while they were chasing a major thunderstorm system. Val Castor said the stone was about the size of a pineapple. That's the biggest hail I've ever seen, and I've been chasing storms for more than 30 years, Castor said. Castor said several baseball-sized hailstones fell while he was driving, including one that cracked his windshield before he spotted the big piece in a ditch on the side of the road. I could see it from probably 100 yards away, he said. The massive hailstone is believed to be a new state record, topping the 6.4-inch hailstone found in Hondo in 2021. It still must be confirmed by a group of researchers that includes the Texas state climatologist, said Jordan Salem, a meteorologist at the National Weather Service office in Lubbock. The heaviest hailstone on record in the U.S. had a reported diameter of 11 inches and weighed nearly 2 pounds. It was discovered near Vivian, South Dakota in July of 2010, according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hey science nerds, happy Monday. It's Kelso Harper, multimedia editor here at Scientific American. I'm filling in for our esteemed host, Rachel Feltman, while she takes a well-deserved break. But don't worry, she'll be back on Wednesday to talk about a culinary delicacy that may take you by surprise: cicadas. But for now, it's time to catch up on some science news. For Science Quickly, I'm Kelso Harper. Alrighty, let's kick off Pride Month by remembering one of our favorite queer science heroes. This Friday marks 70 years since, well, the rather sad and untimely death of British mathematician Alan Turing. Turing is now famous for leading the effort to decrypt Nazi-coded messages during World War II and is often called one of the fathers of modern computing. You may remember him being played by none other than Benedict Cumberbatch in The Imitation Game, which came out almost 10 years ago? Wow, time really flies.
Turns out that's the only German you need to know to break Enigma.
Unfortunately, Turing didn't receive any of this recognition during his lifetime. He unfortunately died in disgrace and was brutally punished for his sexuality and didn't receive a formal pardon until 2013. But on a lighter note, Turing was once quoted as saying something quite lovely, which is, "One day, ladies will take their computers for walks in the park and tell each other, 'My little computer said such a funny thing this morning.'" So we have to imagine he'd be feeling pretty vindicated by our last news episode about the hilariously creepy antics of the latest OpenAI model. Also, I just said that in the park the other day. How did he know? Speaking of taking our funny little computers out for walks, despite the widespread belief that our phones inflict psychological damage on us, a new study found that we sure love using them anyway. More specifically, the study looked at how smartphone usage changed the moods of teenage participants. As smartphone ownership and use have gone up among teens, so have rates of depression and other mood disorders. Many suspect this isn't a coincidence, but previous research on the subject had largely been inconclusive or produced conflicting results. So this new study found that teens reported better moods while using their phones and said that their moods improved from their phone usage. The researchers were quick to point out that these findings aren't necessarily inconsistent with the theory that phones contribute to depression, anxiety, and other issues in teens. And while using your phone as a mood-boosting tool can go awry, for some teens it may actually be a fairly innocuous and even healthy way of self-soothing. In other tech news, last Thursday, a new paper examined the impact of not quite misinformation on social media. You've probably heard a lot about misinformation and all the dangers it poses, and you've likely seen various social platforms flag some content as containing misinformation. But in this new study, researchers looked at stories that weren't technically false, but were framed in a misleading way. For example, one story the researchers tracked was published in the Chicago Tribune in 2021 with the headline, quote, "A healthy doctor died 2 weeks after getting a COVID-19 vaccine. CDC is investigating why." While it was true that a doctor died during that time frame after getting vaccinated, there was absolutely no evidence to suggest their death was related to the vaccination itself, let alone that this provided proof of some larger issues with COVID vaccines. The researchers found that misleadingly factual information like this was 46 times more consequential for driving vaccine hesitancy than content flagged as misinformation. Figuring out how to combat misleading and incorrect information about public health should be a top priority right now because we've got plenty of contagions to keep an eye on. While the CDC is no longer requiring hospitals to report their COVID data, California's Department of Public Health says cases appear to be slowly rising in the state. Australia has also reported an uptick in cases. Let's all try to remember that even mild cases of COVID can leave people with debilitating long-term symptoms. So don't forget to stay home if you feel sick, wear a mask in crowded settings, and test yourself as needed. On the bird flu front, and yes, unfortunately, that is also still a thing, in late May, the CDC said that while the risk of cow-to-human transmission of H5N1 is considered low, the agency is preparing for, quote, developments that could increase the risk to human health, noting that 3 human cases have now been confirmed, including one that involved upper respiratory symptoms. The virus causing the current bird flu outbreak recently showed up in beef for the first time, too. But the U.S. Department of Agriculture says cooking meat to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit will kill the virus. But maybe just lay off the steak tartare for now. And in case our last report on the dangers of raw milk didn't persuade you, a new study found that drinking unpasteurized milk with H5N1 led to quick onset flu symptoms in lab mice. So cook your cow products, folks. Whew, okay, let's end with something a little brighter. If you missed those wildly bright auroral displays a few weeks back because of cloudy skies, like me, I'm still devastated, you might just be in luck. Those incredible light shows occurred when several solar flares and so-called coronal mass ejections hit us at the same time, creating a powerful solar storm. And that part of the sun that was filled with sunspots rotated out of our sight in the days that followed, but now it's coming back around. In fact, it should be facing us during the new moon on Thursday, which will provide the same extra dark skies that helped make the last month's solar storm so very magical for everyone who saw it, which was not me, but it's okay. We can't know for sure that we'll get hit with enough space weather for auroras to venture as far from the poles as they did last time, but keep an eye out for reports of solar storms this week and try to get yourself to an area without clouds or light pollution if you can. I certainly will be making a run for it. And that is it for this week's News Roundup. Rachel will be back on Wednesday with that surprisingly delicious story about cicadas. And don't forget to tune in on Friday for the last episode of our latest fascination series, which is all about Cape Cod's #1 problem. Get it? Well, if not, you should go listen to the last 2 Friday episodes to get up to speed on how a yellow tide is turning the waters of Cape Cod green. Also, before you go, we want to hear from you. How do you like the new episode formats? Are there any stories or subjects you'd like us to cover? Email us any of your thoughts or ideas at sciencequickly@sciam.com. Seriously, we read them. I read them personally, and I really appreciate hearing your thoughts. Secondly, Science Quickly is just a very small taste of all the fascinating goodness Scientific American has to offer. You can get more in your inbox by signing up for our newsletter, Today in Science, or any of our weekly newsletter roundups if you don't want an email every day, even though it's a great email. You can also find us on basically all of the things, Instagram, TikTok, X, Reddit, YouTube, etc., etc. But you'll really get everything by heading to scientificamerican.com. Plus, if you, like me, get tired of staring at a screen all day, we still publish a gorgeous 3-dimensional magazine, chock full of knowledge almost every month, 11 months out of the year. I read it with my coffee in the morning, and it's a glorious experience, and I feel very fancy when I carry it around with me, so I'm just throwing that out there. Anywho, thank you for tuning in to this week's News Roundup. I'll catch you next time Rachel needs a breather, but until then, I'm Kelso Harper, and you are listening to Science Quickly.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Wisconsin's Attorney General announced felony forgery charges against 3 Trump fake elector scheme organizers on June 4th. Wisconsin is the 5th state to bring criminal charges in the scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election, though Wisconsin's 10 fake electors have yet to be charged. 2 Trump attorneys, Kenneth Chesbrough and Jim Trupus, and a Trump campaign staffer, Mike Roman, are charged with Class H felonies for forgery, with maximum sentences of 6 years in jail and a $10,000 fine, according to the Wisconsin Examiner. One of the alleged architects of the fake elector scheme, Chesbrough cooperated with federal authorities and reportedly spoke to Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona investigators. Trupus, a former Dane County judge, and Roman, a Trump campaign aide, allegedly prepared and facilitated delivery of the documents. The AG's complaint reads, quote, on December 16, 2020, defendant Trupus, defendant Chesbrough, and others traveled by charter jet to Washington, D.C. for a meeting at the White House in the Oval Office involving then-President Trump. In an email 2 days later, defendant Trupus reminded defendant Chesbrough that, quote, nothing about our meeting with the president can be shared with anyone, unquote. The 3 defendants face arraignment on September 19th. Only a civil suit has been brought so far against the 10 alleged Wisconsin signers of the fake certification document. Read the AG's criminal complaint and the signed fake elector document at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Environmental Protection Agency raided a Department of Energy facility just outside Denver, Colorado. Rockwell International operated Rocky Flats plutonium processing plant on behalf of the federal government. From 1952 until 1989, workers there made plutonium triggers for nuclear warheads. They reported procedurally unsafe working conditions and rare forms of cancer. Workers also worried about disposal of radioactive material and the potential public health threat the facility posed. Just after 9 a.m., 90 FBI and EPA agents executed Operation Desert Glow, beginning their raid and investigation into potential environmental crimes at the 6,000-plus acre facility. According to Kristen Iverson, author of Full Body Burden, Growing Up in the Shadows of Rocky Flats, evidence collected over the course of 18 days indicated that for more than 30 years, spills, leaks, and waste disposal practices have contaminated dozens of sites around the facility. The most significant public health issue is groundwater pollution, and more than 2,640 pounds of plutonium is missing. The 21-month grand jury investigation revealed that the facility had been burning radioactive and toxic waste in an incinerator for decades, despite regulations requiring its shutdown. It also revealed secret dumping of radioactive waste into officially closed waste ponds. Infuriated jurors wrote their own grand jury report when they learned a plea deal had been cut with millions in fines, but that there would be no indictments. Their report remains sealed. Rocky Flats was eventually declared a Superfund site, and years of cleanup began. In 2001, Congress decided to turn most of the acreage into a wildlife refuge with park trails for hiking and horseback riding.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Mertro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the upper 80s. The report says we're going to be cooler than yesterday, and indeed, we went to about the mid-90s yesterday here at the mothership, and to be honest with you, I expect it to be that warm again today. Regardless, we will have sunny conditions throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to upper 50s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then mainly sunny tomorrow with highs in the mid to upper 90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen remains very high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 39 parts per million, so it's ticking up. And that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, so if you have similar numbers, or even ones that are a little lower, take care. And you know how to take care. SPF. Slather it on. Okay. Barometric pressure is falling at 30 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 71%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 65 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 71 degrees and fair. Rome is 87 and sunny. Kabul is 61 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 78 and cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 52 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and fair, and they have another beach hazard advisory, so look out for sneaker waves. Never turn your back on the ocean. Just don't do it. Chicago, Illinois is 75 degrees and sunny with a small craft advisory. And New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. John Gambrell at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Mertro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The leader of the United Arab Emirates met with an official in the Taliban government still wanted by the U.S. on an up to $10 million bounty over his involvement in an attack that killed an American citizen and other assaults. The meeting highlights the growing divide internationally on how to deal with the Taliban, who seized control of Afghanistan in 2021 and since have barred girls from attending school beyond the 6th grade and otherwise restricted women's roles in public life. While the West still does not recognize the Taliban as Kabul's government, nations in the Mid East and elsewhere have reached out to them. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the ruler of Abu Dhabi, met Sirajuddin Haqqani at the Qasr al-Shati Palace in the Emirati capital. The state-run WAM News, WAM, reported that it published an image of the sheikh shaking hands with Haqqani, the Taliban's interior minister, who also has the Haqqani Network, a powerful network within the group, blamed for some of the bloodiest attacks against Afghanistan's former Western-backed government. The two sides discussed strengthening the bonds of cooperation between the two countries and ways to enhance ties to serve mutual interests and contribute to regional stability, WAM said. The discussions focused on economic and development fields as well as support for reconstruction and development in Afghanistan. For their part, the Taliban described the two men as discussing mutual interests without elaborating. It added that the Taliban spy chief, Abdul Haq Wasik, also took part in the meeting. Wasik had been held for years at the U.S. military's prison at Guantanamo and released in 2014 in a swap that saw the release of U.S. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, who had been captured after leaving his post in 2009. Mike Corder at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Voters went to the polls in the Netherlands to kick off the European parliamentary elections yesterday that span 4 days across the 27 member states and are expected to deliver gains for the hard right. Geert Wilders of the far-right Party for Freedom, or PVV, was among the first senior politicians to cast his ballot, having sent shockwaves around Europe 6 months ago by becoming the biggest party in the Dutch National Parliament. He now wants to build on that popularity and set the tone for much of the bloc, with calls to claw powers back to national capitals and away from the EU so member states have more autonomy on issues such as migration. Paradoxically, like many hard-right parties across the bloc, he wants to get more powers in the European Parliament so he can weaken the EU institutions from within. Sound familiar? Well, that is why he was immediately calling for a broad alliance of hard-right parties to break up the traditional coalition of Christian Democrats, Socialists, pro-business liberals, and Greens. Wilders, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and French opposition leader Marine Le Pen stand in stark contrast to much of the left and many center parties, which call for a more united European approach on anything from climate change measures to defense, arguing individual nations only have a weak voice on the global stage. It is important that the EU is a good and strong partner, said Gerard Kroon, a 66-year-old who works for the Hague municipality and voted in City Hall for pro-Europe party Volt. We have to get things done all together, not only in Europe, but in the Netherlands too. Since the last EU election in 2019, populist, far-right, and extremist parties now lead governments in 3 EU nations. And they are part of a governing coalitions in several others and appear to have surging public support across the continent. We need to be a bulwark against these Vladian policies, and you know that's exactly what it is. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.